Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Abby and today I'm going to be talking about emergency funds. I feel like it's important that we talk about some of the basic steps in starting to build or rebuild your finances and your life. Emergency funds are pretty damn important, and I think over the last year we've all realized how important it is to have a backup plan in place in case all hits the fan. One of the biggest things that made me really consider needing an emergency fund was when everything had kicked off in 2020. We didn't know if we were gonna have jobs. We didn't know what our work situation was gonna be like. In fact, no one was allowed to leave the house there was a certain point where everyone was at home and you couldn't even go to work. It was that bad and we didn't know what was gonna happen. So if we'd had an emergency fund in place at that time, we probably would have been way less stressed. We would have been just sitting there chilling, thinking like, eventually this will fix itself. Eventually things will go back to normal. It's fine. We can take 6 months off work and just chill, right? Not that we would do that, but like if that was the case, that we had no choice, the option would be there, and that's the important thing. It's having the option over anything that is most important. So first things first, what is an emergency fund? So an emergency fund is a pot of money that you put aside. It's basically like your rainy day fund. It's a pot of money that is aside specifically for emergencies. It's not a rainy day fund exactly, but an emergency fund, literally. What is an emergency? An emergency is you have lost your job and you do not know when you will be able to find a new job. If that is your only stream of income, you have no more income coming into the household for you, so it's an emergency. You need to make money or have money saved up in order to survive. What else? Medical emergencies, they're not that big here in the UK because we have the NHS, which is our National Health Service, and essentially most emergencies medically related are free in the UK. Things that you might want to get done that you will have to wait for a very long time or it's not free are things like dental. So if you do have like a dental emergency, you will probably have to pay that out of pocket, or it will be subsidized in some way, but you still will have to pay for that. So if you have to have major surgery on your teeth or something like that, or if you have like maybe a long-standing condition or something that's happened and you do not want to go to the NHS, like maybe you want to have private care for a very specific reason, you'll have to pay for that. So I guess if you're at that point, you probably either know, unless it comes out of nowhere, you probably know you have this pre-existing condition or whatever it is that you want to have done privately, whatever it is that's going on. Other than that, health isn't a big thing here in the UK. So an emergency is basically something that is out of your control, that happens randomly. Maybe your car breaks down or there's a fire. Like, this is really like drastic, but like there's a fire and maybe you're a renter and just something happens to your apartment, you get robbed, like something happens, something that you need is taken, or your laptop breaks down and it's your literal source of income because you work from home maybe. That is an emergency, and I'm guessing you can figure out what is personally an emergency for you. So that's what an emergency is. What is an emergency fund? It's pretty self-explanatory. It's literally a fund that will pay for any of these emergencies that happen randomly or out of the blue, so that you're not left financially in debt, having to turn to like credit cards or personal loans or anything that's high interest that you'll be paying off for years to come in the future, and that could also potentially hurt your credit score or hurt your chances of, maybe if you want to buy a house soon, getting out a personal loan is probably not really great for your affordability. That is in place to basically pay for any emergencies that might blindside you out of nowhere. Now, the next thing is, how much should your emergency fund be? This is really personal to everyone. I've heard a million people talk about how much you should have in your emergency fund. One of the most popular ones is Dave Ramsey says you should have $1,000 in your emergency fund to cover any emergencies as a base, and then you paying off your debt, and then also once you've paid off your debt, build a bigger emergency fund like 3 to 6 months. And 3 to 6 months is about the average I hear thrown out around, and I think it's a really good number, just because if it is income related and you don't have any other sources of income and you lose your job, then you're gonna need to have at least a few months, because you might be able to get a job like in a month, but you might not, depending on the climate of the world. Like right now, it's probably not that easy to get a job, depending on where you work and what you're willing to do. These are things to consider. Firstly, you need to figure out how much your expenses are, like how much are your monthly expenses. So if you're building a personal emergency fund or a joint emergency fund, figure out how much your expenses are monthly, either jointly or separately, singly, and then decide first whether you want to do 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months. Maybe you have multiple income sources and you know that if I lose my job, I'm still going to be having this amount of income coming in. I actually only need this amount to supplement. Then you can calculate it that way. That's also a really good way of doing it. That is very personal based on your different kinds of incomings. Personally, what I decided to do was that we have 1 month's expenses in our emergency fund. And then because I didn't want to not be putting any money into like investments, things that are quite timed that you need to be in pretty early. Also saving for a house, we have other things that we're saving for or investing in. And I thought it was important that we continue to do those. So we decided to do 1 month first, and then to be just adding periodically every month until we reach like 3 or 6 months, depending. For us personally, I personally have like multiple streams of income and can always find a way to make income. So I'm not very worried because my expenses aren't crazily high. Like our expenses are quite low. It's kind of the reason we moved, because I really wanted to bring our expenses down. So especially during this climate, anything's possible. And I wanted us to be able to live well and be able to save loads of money, invest loads of money without having to drastically increase our income. So I decided to do 1 month first and then working towards 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, a year. So ideally you want to have like 6 months to a year. That would be amazing. However, depending on what your expenses are, that's a lot of money. So if you do decide to do the £1,000 and then add periodically until you reach the other goals, decide how much you want to put away each month towards it. Maybe choose a percentage of your income that just goes automatically towards your emergency fund. Things will come up. You will have emergencies. Like I've had emergencies and I've been so terrified of using the emergency fund because I'm like, this isn't an emergency enough. So I would just wait it out. Like if you can wait it out, it's probably not a major emergency. My laptop broke and I need my laptop. There's no two ways about it. I need my laptop. However, I was just like, I don't want to use our emergency fund for it. We will save up for it. In a couple of months, I'll buy a new laptop. And so that's what we did. Sometimes you're gonna have to make the decision on what is an emergency and what is not. It might theoretically be an emergency, but emotionally, how you feel might be entirely different when the time comes. Also, the things that you think aren't an emergency might end up becoming an emergency. So do keep that in mind, that although you're saving towards certain emergencies, you might find that you prioritize what is an emergency if you're not in a steady situation, like you're employed and you have steady income. Like we're both self-employed. So what I class as an emergency might be different for what someone else with a more steady income would class as an emergency. So I have to be I know what is an emergency for me and I know what I can get by on, and like if I can find a way around it, I will. So how much you should have depends on you and it is very personal. So decide on how much you need monthly and then decide on how much you would like to have saved away. So that is emergency funds. If you have any questions about emergency funds, feel free to ask them down below. If there was something I didn't cover, it might help someone else out, and I'm happy to answer as many questions as you have. I personally think it's a lifesaver. Our emergency fund has come in useful, even though sometimes I don't use it, like if there's an emergency, but to pay off a water bill, we got it was in full, and I was like, I don't want this to be on a direct debit, let's just pay it off in whole. I should have a sinking fund for that, but I hadn't thought that far ahead. So now I have a sinking fund for it, but at the time it seemed like an emergency. So I was just like, let's just pay this off so we don't have this like sitting on us and eating away at our monthly expenses. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel down below. Remember to turn on all notifications, and I will see you next time in a new video. Until then, bye. Either jointly or separately, singularly.